So, hi, everybody. Hi. Um, so, grant me a moment of perhaps grandiosity, because I don't know if anybody outside the circle of friends that I show this to is ever going to see it. But allow me to imagine that I'm speaking to a group of people, either live or actually, whoever I'm speaking to over the internet. But let's just say I'm in an amphitheater with maybe 100 people. And so I get to the end and I'm like, okay, now I'm going to do the acknowledgements. And, I start rattling off. Thanks to my dad for being a great dad. Thanks to my mom for being a great mom. Thanks to my stepmom for being a great stepmom. Blah, blah, blah. Dry, to say the least. So everybody's filing away. Now, I think there would probably be two groups of people who stay behind. And first, there would be a group of people maybe that are kind of crowding me or come up, and they're hot and bothered. They got a bone to pick. They got, something I'm really wrong about that they want to make sure I know. And so I say to that group of people, hey, I'm really interested in what you have to say. Can you give me the room for a couple minutes? Because I want to talk to this other group of people for a little bit. And so they leave, and the other group of people, maybe a couple, if I'm lucky, are kind of sitting in their seats with a glassy look on their face. And so I say to those people, hey, come on down, let's talk for a second. Because I think you guys are the guys that really get it, right? Because everybody thinks they got it, And there are some people that are like, yeah, I get it. And there are some people that are like, yeah, I get it. And then there are some people who are like, yeah, I get it. But these people, I think, are the people who are like, oh my God, it's true. And these are my people. Because that's how I was when this first became clear to me. It was like, whoa. And so I want to talk to this group of people, and that's actually what this video is a little subterfuge saying that this is an afterword, because it's sort of my attempt to virtually, through YouTube, do the same thing of cutting through the people who have no interest in sticking around for all that boring stuff. I think the other people who are just sort of stuck in their seats, they're just going to be ignoring that, and they're still going to be around. And, I think on YouTube, well, anyway, that's actually what this video is I want to talk to those people, because the people who are going, oh my God, it's true, those are the people who don't need any more convincing. And so that's what this video actually is trying to start a discussion with the people who don't need any more convincing. Because to us, I think, it's just, it's so self-evidently true that there's not much point in debating it. Once you realize it's true, the question is, what now? So that's who I'm going to imagine I'm talking to at the moment, is the people who have gone past needing to quibble about it and who are like, well, geez, now what? Because I've been there, and I'm going to share some thoughts. This isn't scripted. I just wrote down some notes that I'm going to go from about some thoughts that I've had, because I've had a little time to deal with, what now? And hopefully I can help, possibly, get through the stunned period and help, well, share some ideas, and maybe we can start to get somewhere. I don't know. The whole thing seems really grandiose to me to even think about, that through YouTube, through my little babble, I don't know, some kind of group could coalesce, but maybe. So in that hope, I'd like to share with you, and I'm going to talk to you now as if you're here, as if that's who I'm actually talking to. So just among us, I'd like to share some thoughts. So yeah, I've already done some of the things on the list. Bye, everybody else. We're the ones who really get it. What now? Then I have here, optimism is hard. And maybe this is just me. But once I realized how true this is, it's difficult to feel certain that humanity's going to get it together in time to actually accomplish our reason for existing. And that can be daunting, to say the least. And so, this comes up regularly or intermittently for me, and if that's what you're going through, or if that comes up, I sympathize. I don't have an easy answer, because, well, the next thing on this list is reverse reality, rent, and presidents. And that kind of ties into the feeling of optimism being a challenge. Because, look, once you accept this, the world kind of starts seeming upside down a little bit, or inside out, because what we have to do in the day-to-day, what everybody's concerned with, is, paying the rent and who's president and things like that. And if we, as a species or as a society, really put much thought into the universe, except for the people whose job that is, it's kind of an afterthought. I gotta pay the rent, I gotta do presidents, that's what's real. But the fact of the matter is, that's not real. What's real is the universe. The universe is, in fact, the definition of reality. And so, one of the things about this concept, once you really get it, is it puts humanity in a defined relationship with the cosmos. And it feels more real than anything else. Because what's out there is reality. And so, trying to interface with society where a whole different set of assumptions that, once you start to think about it, become more and more delusional, is challenging and can be part of what leads to a feeling of being daunted. But again, I feel you if that's something you're going through. But I think what we have to say about that is, tough. Because that's the world that we're in. And I don't think trying to separate ourselves from that world makes any sense. The guy standing on the street corner in a sandwich board, ringing the bell and saying the end is nigh, or we better get to space. I don't think that does much. If our real goal is to try and gently nudge humanity towards its true purpose, we have to consider what's going to be the most effective. And so we have to play the game. We have to buy into the world of rent and presidents until society as a whole is ready to move past that. So how's society going to move past that? The next thing I have here is proof. So like I said, the group of people that I'm talking to now, we don't need proof. It's just freaking obvious. But just because we don't need it doesn't mean it's not necessary. It is necessary. And, at the very start of these videos, I talked about what if there was a scientifically proven meaning of life. And you can't have that without proof. I mean, the whole point is a planet-wide unification has to be based on something that's independently verifiable by any individual. And so, I mean, what could that even be? What could proof even be? And, outside in question, I have to say that for me, the difficulty of proving it is a proof, because when you look at it the other way, let's say some computer was told to study Earth, and it was studying Earth right now, and it was only given one piece of foreknowledge, and that piece of foreknowledge was it's one thing, it's one creature. You're going to study a single creature that's surrounding the planet Earth. So here's my question. this computer, studying Earth as it is right now, starting from scratch except the preconception that it's a single thing, what is it ever going to come across in its studies that makes it even doubt that this is a single creature? I mean, unless the thing that was studying us happened to look like humans, I don't think humans would be any evidence at all that this isn't a single creature. We don't look separate from this to anyone but us. So, I mean, how are you going to convince any, objective observer that this isn't a single creature? Again, though, I mean, that's an argument that's compelling to me. But again, that's not proof. And if we're going to become organized as a species around really the thing that only we can do, alone among the species of the Earth, only we can save it, only we can get out of here. If we're going to do that, we've got to have proof. And so one thing that could be proof is the discovery of some kind of sentience, consciousness. But I have to say, I think there's a danger in assuming that it exists. And to me, it's not so relevant. To me, for us to be in this situation where there's a single creature that evolved us, I don't think there's any necessity that that creature be particularly sophisticated cognitively. I mean, things are capable of evolving things that are more intelligent than them. I mean, DNA can't itself solve a Sudoku, but it can create a thing that can solve a Sudoku. And, if DNA is the mechanism by which this creature creates cells inside of itself, then those cells could definitely go on to understand things beyond its ability to understand. It could be a worm. It could have the consciousness of a mold and still have created us and still need saving in the way that it obviously does need saving. So the question of consciousness, if we were able to prove it, would be a very definitive and compelling truth or proof. But I don't think we have any reason to assume it's there, for one thing. And also, I think there's a danger of that being a huge rabbit hole to go down. I think what's necessary to understand is that that's not necessary. If we could find it, it would be great. But I think if we're going to look for proof, I don't know if that's something we should hang our hat on or, place our chips down on, go all in on, that exists. Oh, right, sentience, but is it us? Right? I mean, it doesn't seem ridiculous to say that, I said in the other video that we're lung cells, and I mean, that's just because we're obviously not dirt cells or water cells, but we could be neurons, right? I mean, the neurons in our brain really didn't have any self-awareness, didn't know they existed for most of their existence. They did their job, but did they know anything about themselves? So it seems to, be plausible that we could have developed all this intelligence and actually what we are is the brain of this thing. It's not proof again, but it's an interesting conjecture. And it would also sort of make our searching for sentience kind of also somewhat ironically self-defeating or pointless, I guess. Ironically, a red herring to search for the thing that we actually are. But actually, okay. I mean, there's a couple things that I've heard here and there that might be parts of this puzzle, and I'm not I'm not a scientist of any kind, and so this is all just kind of mushy stuff that I've heard that's mushed together, but maybe there's something to it. You got to start with the knowledge that, of how incomplete our understanding of life on Earth really is, because we barely understand 1% of 1% of 1% of it. And when I say that, you might be like, oh yeah, that's right, there are all those insects in the Amazon that we don't know about. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the bacteria. Because bacteria, taken in aggregate, by biomass, far outweigh all the rest of the life forms on Earth combined. The bacteria is, it's freaking omnipresent. It's dense. It's here, and we don't think about it. We can't see it. We don't interact with it directly, and we've been ignorant for most of our existence of it. And the scientific method is great, but the demands of the scientific method make it particularly hard for us to actually learn about bacteria. And one of the reasons that we barely understand 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of what the bacteria is doing is that because of our methods, we can only actually study the bacteria that we're able to keep alive in laboratories. And that's a very small amount. We have pathetically failed to keep most bacteria, the overwhelming mass of bacteria we have failed to keep alive in laboratories. And so here's an example of something that we've been unable to study. So there's a fish, and I might have some of these details wrong, but the general point is solid. There's a fish that lives deep, deep, deep in the ocean, and it bioluminesces. And the way it bioluminesces is it kind of has a little cloud of bacteria around it that glows. And there's a symbiotic relationship between it and the bacteria. But the bacteria doesn't always bioluminesce. At a young age, there's sort of the bacterial cloud is just forming, and it has to reach a critical mass before it starts glowing. And that critical mass just kind of happens to coincide with the moment that the fish is mature enough to go out in the ocean on its own. So what's sort of happening here, obviously, is some kind of trigger or communication between the bacteria once it reaches a certain size, or maybe once it goes out on the open ocean, that it's like, hey guys, let's start glowing. And we don't really understand that process, and we can't study it, because to study it, we'd have to recreate all those conditions in a laboratory. The depth of the ocean, we'd have to keep that fish alive in the conditions that it needs to stay alive. And, we'd have to be able to create a control system, a system with an identical kind of fish that didn't need that bioluminescing cloud of bacteria to stay alive, so that we could, through the scientific method, study the differences between, it's just, we can't understand bacteria unless we start to understand them in the wild, unless we start to understand what they're doing, where they are, because otherwise we'd have to basically create a replica Earth to study what the bacteria are doing. And so it's a couple other things that, mush together here. So in studying snow, it was found that bacteria cause snow, or at least most snow. There was an attempt to, go out in a snowy field and study every individual snowflake to the degree that that was possible. And the great majority of them had at their center a bacteria, a particular kind of bacteria that in the precipitation cycle ends up hanging around in clouds in the sky. And this bacteria has a unique ability. It can actually form a tiny little piece of ice on its surface. So it's floating around in the clouds up there. And what happens when it forms that little tiny piece of ice is that becomes sort of the seed crystal around which a snowflake forms. And so in a large part, I think most snowflakes, it can be speculated, are bacteria parachutes, right? It forms this little bit of snow, and the flake forms around it and it wafts down to Earth, where it hangs around until it gets caught up in the dew and goes back up into the sky as part of the precipitation cycle. So that's interesting, right? And what's also interesting is there's a conjecture that all rain starts as snow. So what's happening is, through this bacterial process or some other process, all clouds sort of initially form snow, and then once the snow leaves the cloud and encounters the atmosphere, it kind of instantly turns into liquid and becomes rain. So, again, I'm not clinical in any way about this. I don't have a grounding about this. But look, you take a group of bacteria that can communicate with each other or have a critical mass to do this behavior of bioluminescence that we don't understand, right? In some way they're making a choice, and maybe that's attributing a sentience that doesn't exist, but in some way they're communicating in a way that triggers a complex behavior. And then bacteria apparently are the root source of snow, the root source of rain. And this puts maybe a different perspective on the butterfly effect, right? Because we've long speculated that accurately predicting the weather is impossible because a butterfly flapping its wings in China can cause a tsunami in Antarctica, right? And so what if there's also another factor at play, which is a kind of decision-making process on the part of the bacteria, some sort of signaling between themselves based on criteria we don't understand that, to oversimplify or colloquialize, that decides when it rains. But there's a decision-making process in the weather. Of course we wouldn't be able to predict it. So again, that's a bunch of mushy stuff, but it seems to me if we're going to set out to try and find, look, if there's not a brain, maybe there's some sort of nervous system by which the various parts of the organs of this creature communicate with each other that we're ignorant of. And the bacteria seem like a good place to start looking. So, for what it's worth, just some thoughts. I want to mention, as part of what now, the dangers, what I see as the dangers of co-opting. And to say co-opting presumes that some kind of movement comes out of this, and again, that's maybe grandiose. But should there arise a movement that's trying to urge or ferry, shepherd, perhaps, humanity towards this destiny, it's going to be necessary to form alliances, but also be really clear about where their priorities start and end and our priorities start and end. And so the list of things that I think there's a danger of, that alliances may be necessary, but they're going to be tricky. Environmentalists, tricky alliance, spiritualists, atheists, and Gaia theory. So let me go over these. Give me a second here, because I wrote down I took the definition of Gaia theory off of Wikipedia, and I think there it is, okay. So let me start with environmentalists, because they're the sort of most obvious allies here, and the priorities are very similar. But I think there's also an opportunity for just huge, pointless debates to start. And then again, I think it's important to try to avoid going down rabbit holes. And it's a question of priority, because obviously we do need to manage our existence in the environment in order to have the time to put together the apparatus by which we move everything to another planet. But that said, that's not more important. Or in the question of priorities, let's say that we prioritize environmentalism as the number one priority. And so we do an A+ job on preserving and stabilizing the environment. So good, right? But let's say that we put getting to another planet second. And so, after we've got our A+ going, that's when a planet smashes into us. Or that's when worldwide tectonic detachment happens, causing lava to pour out of the, Earth's mantle and destroy everything or whatever. In the story, like, what if Gleep Gloop Glorp or what if Mick Mick Mick? I mean, so great, wonderful. We stabilize the environment that then we allowed to die. No. The priority has to be getting out of here. We have to, I think, and this is where it could be a big argument, I think we have to shoot for maybe like a C+ job on the environment where, we're stabilized enough that we've bought ourselves the time to get out of here. Because if we do a C+ job on the environment and an A+ job on getting out of here, well, we've saved ourselves. And so to me that has to be the priority, but I can see a lot of conflict coming about. So, tricky alliance. We would like to have the help of people who feel that environmentalism is terribly important, but we also can't allow that to derail the actual top priority. Again, if there's an us, again, it feels grandiose to even talk about this, but these are the thoughts that, rattle around in my brain. And if you're also in the Legion of the Stunned, should there ever be a Legion of the Stunned, these may rattle around in your brain and maybe more productively. So, talking about spiritualists and atheists. So, I think a great many spiritual traditions might be able to sort of make a claim on this perception, right? Because there are many spiritual traditions, as far as I'm aware, that kind of have at their center this kind of we are all one premise, right? We're all one. And that's, that is essentially what this perception starts from. But then those spiritual traditions go on to layer on top of that a lot of other agendas. And those agendas, are wrong. They're great as far as they go. Spiritual advancement and human cooperation and all that stuff. But, and look, perhaps the spiritual experiences that become foundational for these religions, perhaps those experiences are authentic and are an actual sort of keying in to some kind of interconnectedness that actually exists. And so maybe they're an actual real perception of the mechanism by which we are interconnected with the creature that created us. And that said, then they go on to get everything else wrong, because none of these religions are like, we're inside a creature that's almost died several times and that we need to really organize to save. So great, respect to the spiritual traditions that, would validate this, but their deal isn't our deal. And so I think, we should be wary of that, but also we need to be balanced and wary of the opposite, because atheists, again, full disclosure, I believe in God and I pray all the time, but, to me, it only makes sense that any God that exists, put the mysteries in front of us for us to solve them, not so that we could just say, hey, what's the answer, and it would answer all of them for us. That doesn't make any sense to me. But that said, I'm not an atheist. I have sympathy with atheism because I think it's extremely rational, and I think rationality also has to be something that God wanted us to have. But atheists tend to have a bone to pick and tend to want a club to smash religion with. And their drive tends to be like, wrong, 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 wrong. And that's really not part of this. Again, let's say the entire world converted to Islam and then managed to get us all off the planet. Well, mission accomplished. I don't have a problem with that. It's, again, another rabbit hole. There's I think, a lot of alliance to be found in atheism because, like I said, I think this perception is so profound that it will eventually sort of cause irrelevance in all of the religions that claim to know everything and never mentioned this. But that said, that's a side effect. I don't think it's anything we need to really work hard to achieve. The truth will rise, I suppose. So again, I think atheists are tricky partners. So let me talk about Gaia theory. Now, people who know a little bit already about Gaia theory may have sort of discarded stuff I've said as like, oh, I already know all that, right? Oh, this is just Gaia theory. Not really. Let me read the Wikipedia definition of Gaia theory. The Gaia hypothesis, also known as the Gaia theory or the Gaia principle, proposes that living organisms interact with their inorganic surroundings on Earth to form a synergistic and self-regulating complex system that helps maintain and perpetuate the conditions for life on the planet. So, okay. I mean, as far as it goes, that kind of is this. But it's also not in some important ways. First of all, inorganic. I mean, I went into that whole thing about what's alive and what's not alive. And, assuming that this is a single creature, rocks are like bones. Are your bones alive? Does it matter? I don't think you can really call bones inorganic. Again, rabbit hole? I think so. So, inorganic surroundings, that's not part of this. Also, Gaia tends to be mainly concerned about the nature of the planet. And yes, this profoundly is about the nature of the planet, but it's also mainly about the nature of humanity. Not just that we're a part of this, but that we're an important part with a specific purpose, which Gaia theory doesn't get into. Also, the word partnership rubs me wrong in the Gaia hypothesis. Partnership? Like we're on the board or something? No. We're not partners. We're like, I don't know, really well-paid flunkies or something. I mean, we're great. We can do something that no other organism can do, and we should do it, and it's our responsibility to do. But we're not partners in this. So I guess at base, I think the Gaia hypothesis is not humiliating enough to be actually accurate. It tries to leave humanity with some dignity that I don't think we deserve. I think we do deserve a dignity, just not the one that we've claimed for ourselves for most of our existence. And Gaia, again, also does... The history of the Gaia theory has been very bogged down in the consciousness argument, which, again, I think is a rabbit hole, red herring. Communism was just a red herring. Like the Gaia hypothesis. So again, I think that this really can't be lumped in with the Gaia hypothesis because, to me, demonstrating consciousness is irrelevant. Gaia theory is also explicitly environmentalist, and like I said, there's a lot of overlap with environmentalism here, but there's also a danger of getting lost with the wrong priorities. So that's another major difference from the Gaia theory. And also, the Gaia theory seeks to start from evidence, and to me, the start of this is duh. Because again, I'm talking to the people who get it, and once you get it, you get it. There's duh. And I really believe that once this becomes the dominant paradigm in human perception of our existence, should please that ever happen, I pray, the following generations are going to be like, duh. It's going to seem very obvious to them. And so the Gaia hypothesis, I don't know, it starts from starts one down. To me, it's like, duh, let's go find the evidence, because duh, it's there. And it doesn't address bodyism, It doesn't address the prejudice towards the organization of our cells that makes us think we're something special. Okay, so that's for that. The dangers of co-opting, as I see them, those are the possible perils. So, the other thing, next thing on my list here is be entertaining. Don't be boring. Just, I believe it. And I mean, also, let me just go through the rest of the things on this list because they all kind of lump together. Don't be boring. Just, I believe it. Be entertaining. What do we call it? Look for opportunities. Actual work to be done. How do we do it? From here, actually, 1,000 years? So, like I said, I don't think going out on street corners and ringing a bell, or I don't, grabbing people by the lapels and being like, we gotta get out of here! I don't think that's going to do anything. And if we actually want to be part of the dissemination and eventual, paradigm shifting towards this idea, we got to be cool about it. And, when we talk about it, try to be entertaining, and the soul of wit is brevity. So don't try to force it into conversation. I mean, look, if this becomes the only thing that you talk about, you're going to lose friends. You're going to become isolated. To me, the right way to approach this is, if you're somewhere and somebody says, of course, nobody knows what the real meaning of life is, you can be like, well, I think there's actually a rational basis to conclude the meaning of life. And leave it at that. And if they want to know more, tell them a little more, but just answer the direct question, and if it leads to, a larger explanation, so be it, but let them lead it. And to me, that's the only way forward that's actually going to be effective. Just go forth and believe, and let that belief unfold naturally, however it does in your community or among the people that you encounter. Go forth. Again, it all feels grandiose. And I guess I want to mention that it doesn't feel true. It doesn't feel true to me. This that we live in, the world of rent and presidents, is darn convincing. It's a granite delusion. And all that's necessary really for me is to think about it from the outside in, and it's clear, again, this is obviously true, but you can have sympathy for all the people that aren't there yet, because I don't know, maybe to you it's gonna feel true. I don't know if it'll ever feel true to me, but again, I think later generations, it's not even gonna be a thing. So right, if it's 1,000 years till humanity accepts this, what are we doing in the meantime? We're keepers of the flame, I guess. And, be entertaining. I think that's really all I have to contribute to this. And I can't figure out. There's lots of stuff that needs to be figured out. I mean, obviously, the mechanism and the science of how we literally are going to get everything to another planet is a huge undertaking. And there's lots of things that need to be figured out there. I mean, the design of the ships or the launchers or whatever is going to move us, and then all of the systems that have to be in place to achieve that. We're going to have a profound change in political systems and social systems, possibly even religious systems, the organization of just the assembly of materials necessary to build whatever we're going to have to build, and then the labor of actually building it. It's staggering. So maybe it'll gonna be 1,000 years until we can actually put any of that into effect. But maybe we need that much time to be ready to have figured any of it out, and I can't do that. So again, hopefully, I'm hoping there coalesces some kind of movement or group. Maybe there already exists one that I don't know about that's preparing, using the skills of all of the other people that are going to be necessary. And, there are a lot of actual real world jobs that require those skills, that will then be able to be directly applied to this project. So, we don't have to hole ourselves up with slide rules to figure this out. What do we call it? Because, right, a dog is a dog. It's also whatever, Canis Cutis or something, and then your dog is Jeffrey, Mambo. And so what do we call this, right? It's got to have a, scientific name. I don't know what that is. But it's also got to have, this is ours. This is Spot. We're inside of, Hieronymus Planet. To me, a nice name would be Terra, because then, wherever we are is terra firma. And I kind of like that. We can't call it Earth because we got to get off of Earth. But maybe that's too cutesy. I don't know. Ultimately, I'm not going to be the decider of that. I guess that's my vote. I vote for Terra. But that's a question. And the next things on my list are no big finish, because I don't have a big finish here. Again, this is not intended to be pre-prepared in the way that the rest of it was. I'm hoping to be starting a conversation with the people who really get it and move to the what now question, because that's where I am, and actually all of this is my attempt to answer for myself what now. And I don't know what now. So there's no big finish. The big finish is a question mark. Let's start talking about what now. And finally, we might not need to do anything, because it's very interesting to me that if this is true, if this is actually what we're supposed to be doing on the planet, we've laid most of the groundwork already. We tore off that little piece of gunk and we sent it to the other planet. And we thought we were doing it for vastly different reasons than we were actually doing it, if that's true. And again, if we were created like a cell in a leaf on a tree to do this, if this is what we're for, then we're just going to do it for whatever reasons we think we're going to do it. It's just how we're made. And so maybe we don't need to push it at all. On the other hand, we are also created to become aware of ideas and then push them more explicitly once we know them. So that can be part of the process by which we achieve the goal once we, more clearly understand it. I don't know. And that's, I guess, the place I have to stop. I don't know. But I guess I hope that we can all work together on it. And so I just sincerely to the people who realize that if this is true, they have to start living their lives differently, and that question of how exactly to start living a life differently is going to take a lot of thought and probably going to be a very slow process. To those people, I want to say thank you for listening, and comments welcome.